Tulsi is accusing Google of discrimination. And it's funny, as I read her report, I get a different impression than I initially had when I first started this video, meaning the moment that I was about to start this video, I had a completely different impression of this particular thing. So let's talk about my new impression of this particular item. Tulsi Gabbard is accusing Google of discrimination against her campaign. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you like this content, please like, share. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon if you find yourself coming back to this channel often. It's funny. I agree with her on this, by the way, that Tulsi Gabbard, the argument that she's making, our commons, for the most part, is owned by people who are not us, meaning corporations that seek to maximize the profit off of essentially us having a commons. But that also means that we don't control this ultimately, that at any particular point, any of us can be swept off based on a rule change, based on a metric that an individual puts into a computer. And even if it doesn't have to necessarily be overt in the sense, meaning not necessarily like an Alex Jones type banning, but that in and of itself was atrocious. The fact that all of these networks can band together and say you no longer can speak. Forget the fact that there may be people who actually want to hear him, and forget the fact that people who don't want to hear him can turn him off or not go to his channel. They banned him and swept him away as if he went away. I have problems with that. We all should have to some degree problems with that. And that should also kind of bring together this notion of we don't control the space to which we exist. It's one thing back in the old days where you can get on a podium and you can yell at the height of your lungs. But the way to which we interact with one another, our commons, is digital at this point. Even from the standpoint of the internet, the networks, we don't control any of this stuff despite helping create this stuff. That should be a problem to people, and people don't necessarily care about that. I think I agree with her on this very specific basic point of the politics of it. We need to have a kind of new deal with regards to how we interact with one another and what is considered to be the commons, and how sometimes the technology evolves so fast that we don't really get an idea on how the technology is going to be used. And then all of a sudden this stuff is privatized. And you find out that, well, wait a minute, we interact with each other in a different way now. And that way needs to kind of be solidified, where we have more control over the space. So I agree with her basic point. And I've gotten too far into it, but her basic point is they have dominance over our commons. And they should not be able to control the space to which we interact with in the ways to which we do and have the power in which they have. And in this case, she's talking about Google. She's saying Google is discriminating against her campaign because the hours after the debates, they shut down her ad account. And those are the time frames that people were looking at her most. Now, understand what this means. This is essentially the issue that we are having here to some degree. Because what Tulsi Gabbard is saying is, look, I should have been able to get the ad revenue from the people being interested in me. And you shut that down. Now, Google is saying it was a mistake. It was a blip. It was an accident. Our bad. Tulsi Gabbard is saying you're discriminating against my campaign. And that's wrong. And to some degree, you've hurt us. We were hurt by that. Financially hurt by that. Every video that I've made today, including edgy videos like corporate media goes after Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard sues Google, that was demonetized also. All of those videos demonetized. Do you realize David Pakman put out, I think he said 6 videos. He says like 4 of them were demonetized. Those videos made 100,000 views apiece. Demonetized. That money is gone. In the wind. And by the way, when they demonetize a video, they don't show you video as often or recommend it as often. And you can understand that there's a fiscal thing. They want to show video where you can get ad revenue on. And if they demonetize your video, they're not getting ad revenue on that. Ergo, they don't show it, meaning you get less views. That's a money hit. Those are people who got on YouTube to do a business. They went under this notion that we can do content, providing that the content stays within certain bounds that's not absurd. And for various reasons of pressure that was put on them by political entities, in some cases, in other cases, media organizations that were rivals, they attacked the content creators. It attacked them in the sense of ads in a way that gets allocated. Tulsi Gabbard is arguing, look, these guys have too much power over what we see and what they show you. Do you realize back in the election 2016, when Hillary Clinton's name would come up from the standpoint of emails, Google will give you stuff that was nonsense that nobody was talking about, nobody was thinking about, as if trying to reshape reality. Like a 1984 thing where the Ministry of Truth was changing reality and reshaping it to something that they preferred. If you went into DuckDuckGo, you would get the real story of people were looking at their emails because this seems like a criminal affair. They were shaping reality. Now, her point is they have far too much power in regards to what we see. And they themselves get to determine what we see. And to some degree, there can be political connections associated with these companies because these companies are not impartial actors that are just create this kind of stage. No, they choose. They set narratives to some degree and things that they prefer you to see versus what they don't. Her argument is they have too much power in this process. That process need to be more into public control, or at the very least, public have a say. Or at the very least, some level of rule set by which they can't just determine reality. She's arguing they're discriminating against her campaign. But she's parlaying that discrimination into that argument that I just made. Now, I don't understand the discrimination thing, if I'm being honest. Because there will be certain things that would need to be true for that to be true. If that makes sense. Meaning, they would have had to single her out for this. Now, it's possible, so do not misunderstand me. I'm not necessarily saying she's completely wrong. And if I'm being honest, if I am a political actor, and if I am part of a campaign where the way that the Democratic Party went after her when she first got into this election, she could feel that there are political edges to grind. In which case, from that angle, it may look as if there may be political reasons why this took place. So I don't find that to be, off the reservation per se. It depends on the perspective that you're looking at it at. You have all sorts of... The people involved are not impartial actors. I guess that's my point. And because they're not impartial actors, it doesn't necessarily mean that what you're saying is entirely off the reservation. By the same token, as somebody who's worked in software, or from somebody who's had a bank that has shut their account down, it is not necessarily insane that there were processes in place that would do exactly this. Especially Google. Meaning, for somebody who's worked with Google, I'm not shocked by this, if that makes sense. But that's, more of a reason to be aggravated. Look, Google tomorrow can change their rules. And they can send you an email and they can say, and I'm saying this from personal experience, because what she's talking about for the most part is just YouTube. All of us are working for the same employer at that point. They can send you an email tomorrow and they can say, hey, you ran afoul of something. We didn't like something that you said in this video, did in that particular video, something that you did a year ago. And so we're shutting your account down for a month. Sorry. Here's our rules. And if you want to, say anything else, you can click this link. They can do that because they've done that. And you would have nothing to do about it. You can click that link and you can send an email. That's the best that you can do, and nobody's going to respond to you. Nothing is going to take place. And they would have your account shut down. Somebody, sometimes, will respond to you. In one case, somebody responded with a copyright thing that led up. But in many cases, nothing. They can ice you just like that. Now, what she's talking about is them doing that for a period of time for her account for a presidential campaign for a few hours. Now, her thing is, I can't believe they would have the audacity to do this. Why wouldn't you? From their standpoint, you're just somebody else who's, in one of their accounts. So, look, my point is, from a corporate sense, this is purely bureaucratic and technocratic. Your account bumped up further than we thought your account should bump up. Ergo, we iced it. Tulsi Gabbard looks at this and says, I can't believe they will have the audacity to ice an account from a presidential campaign. And whether or not this was political in the sense of discriminatory, or whether or not you just had the audacity to do it, both of those cases are problematic. And we have to have a conversation about whether or not these organizations should have that much power in the first place. I hope you understand what I'm saying on this. Both are true. Discrimination. I don't know how discrimination works in this sense. She's probably using it in a political way. But look, both can be true. And I would be pissed off either way. Now, encapsulate what I just said for the moment. Put a pin in it. Everything I just said is true. I want to move over to a secondary point that is also, at the exact same time, true. The I am a war vet is not selling. And you're in a contest that needs to sell. Say, for example, you're selling lemons. And you need to sell as many lemons as possible. And you need to sell more lemons than your opponents. And you have, let's say, 22 of them. Pluck a number out of a hat. And not just 22, there are 4 that are doing really, really well in the lemon selling contest. And your shtick is, I was a war vet. I was a soldier. And because I was a soldier, I know how to fucking sell lemons better than anybody else. And none of these nibbling bitches on the stage can sell lemons better than I can sell lemons. But that's not selling you lemons in the way that you thought it was going to sell lemons. Because, at the end of the day, only 2% of the public has been to war. And the American public, for the most part, doesn't really care about it unless it actually touches them. And so for the most part, it doesn't really touch them. They care about it in the abstract, but, jobs and healthcare. So, there's that. And so it's not selling. You hit one of those neocons in the race, that neocon folds and put him down. People like it. Kamala Harris hits Joe Biden. People like it. Kamala Harris goes up in the polls. You hit Kamala Harris. She's not qualified for the job. And people say, wow, she's saying Kamala Harris is not qualified for the job. And if you look online, it's everywhere. There's drama. Hey, our campaign has buzz. We need to follow that buzz up. What can you go with that? We need to sell more lemons. We need to sell more lemons. Well, here's an opportunity. Let's jump on something that is legit, by the way. Like I said, everything I just said in the first part was true. That that there's a group on the left and on the right that screams about this all the time. And by the way, there are multiple people that are talking about breaking these guys up because these guys have too much power. Meaning to associate your campaign with more than just the war footing, but also associate your campaign with something else. Meaning, Tulsi fights tech dominance. Tulsi fight back against tech dominance. And of course, at the end, there's the obligatory, give us money. Now, I don't fault her for this. People think I'm dinking her when I say stuff like this. I'm not. It's her job. It's her job. All of them, across the board, do this. It is their job to do this. Just because Tulsi comes across that she tries to put the angle as being above politics, there is no such thing as being above politics. Anywhere you are is where you're at. Even Sanders, in the last 2016, they were like, wow, he's so above politics. Hillary Clinton used to be so angry. She was like, fuck, to keep thinking he's above politics. And she knew the truth. He wasn't. He's a person who's running as a politician. I applaud her for this. She is more than just a soldier. You shouldn't just use the soldier thing as for everything across the board. You should be able to say, look, this is a problem. Because fact of the matter is, it is an actual problem. And for her to kind of stand up and say, look, these guys shut my account down on a whim. I am a presidential candidate, literally a presidential candidate in an election. And they shut my account down. Whether it was from some technocratic nonsense or whether it was from some kind of discrimination in general. I don't know which one it was, but they did it and they shouldn't be able to do it. That's a problem. I agree with her because that is a problem that I think thousands, maybe tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who work with YouTube as YouTubers deal with on a daily basis. She's not alone in this. That's my point. She is right on from the standpoint of the legit aspect of it. But I would even say she's right on from the standpoint of the politics of it. At least if you're talking about the right and you're talking about elements of the left. Pac-Man has been yakking about this for the last month because he's been losing money on it. But let's go to her account first. This is her Twitter page. The word discrimination has a certain connotation to me. That's all. And I don't know what she technically means in the technical sense. Tulsi 2020. In the hours following the first debate, while millions of Americans searched for information about Tulsi, Google suspended her search account without explanation. It's vital to our democracy that big tech companies can't affect the outcome of elections. That's the other part of this. She is right about that. I mean, look, if you remember before, their argument was that Facebook was getting all of this information and so forth. Look, I don't know a way around that. I mean, ultimately, social media is going to play a role. I think her point is you shouldn't put your finger on the scale. And doing this, taking down her search account, puts their finger on the scale. It's a presidential account. Are you know, either it's incompetence that you don't think that there may be times during the presidential campaign or election that there may be spikes and you don't do anything about that. Like, you know, either incompetence, maybe. Her point is they shouldn't be able to do that in general. Google controls 88% of search results in the United States, giving control over our access to information. Google's arbitrary suspension of the account of a presidential campaign should be of a concern to Americans. Google's discrimination against our campaign reveals the danger of their dominance and how the dominance of big tech over public discourse threatens core values. They threaten our democracy, and Tulsi will fight back on behalf of all Americans, because Tulsi is a soldier after all. Tulsi fights back against big tech dominance, dangerous dominance. And again, I agree with her. I agree. On June 28th, in the media hours, read that part. Big tech dominance represents a clear and present danger to our democracy. That's why Tulsi is fighting back and has filed a lawsuit against Google in federal court. Today, New York Times reports on a lawsuit filed by our campaign against Google. Tulsi gives this statement to the New York Times. Google's discriminatory actions against my campaign are reflective of how dangerous their complete dominance over internet search is, and how the increasing dominance of big tech companies over our public discourse threatens our core American values. I don't know what those are. This is a threat to free speech, fair elections, and to our democracy, and I intend to fight back on behalf of all Americans. Understand what she means by this, though, and that's true. 88% of search is given by Google. Whatever Google shows you is reality. What is Google showing you, and why is Google showing it to you? And do you really question why Google is showing you anything, or do you just receive the information? Do most people question what Google gives them, or do they just accept the information? Do they cross-check it with other search platforms? No, they don't. Most people don't. What Google gives is reality. Google shapes reality. But what Google gives you is not really reality per se. It's just what they give you. I mean, there's a difference in those things. Her point is they're shaping this as it goes along, and that's a little heady, considering you don't necessarily know the political motives of people involved in the organization. It's a private organization. It's a corporation. She has a point. She has a point. I work on this channel. She has a point. Political pressure, when it was applied to Google, Twitter, and Facebook, they got rid of Jones in a heartbeat. That is literally the political institution pressing on private corporations to reshape reality to something that's more akin to their liking. And it would help them to stay in office, because a lot of that was resulting from Donald Trump winning that election. Tulsi Gabbard is a point. She's right on the politics, and she's right on, you could say, I guess the basics of it, or the workings of it. Let's see, somebody, where's my mouse? There it is. John Dunn. Oh, thank you, John Dunn. Yeah. We're supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, but we're not. No, we're not. George Orwell snitched on communists. History is being erased and replaced. You know, I think I was making that argument once before when they were going after Jones. And the way they were, I think it was so bizarre. Like they were like in Britain, they would give D notices in order to prevent them from talking about various elements of one of the cases. I think it was the poisoning case. I can't think of the name of the person right now, but I'm just saying some of this stuff gets really weird. Even, you know, the social media stuff and the information that comes up on social media. That's media. I mean, it's, you know, it's. I guess in the old days, for the most part, there will be a hard publication, and in these days, it's digital print. But that stuff is digital. Anything could happen to it. And for the most part, our reality is so far away from us. Like anything that happens, for the most part, we're finding out about it through some kind of medium, and that medium is always controlled by something else. We have no idea what reality is per se. We always end up with this kind of notion of just kind of erring on one side or the other. Either way, I'll leave it. Guys, if you enjoy it, content, like, share. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Right on, Tulsi. Right on. Thanks all.